Hey everyone, welcome back to chapter 10 and 11 today of Summer of the Secret Squadron. Chapter 10. The Landers Theater was at the upper end of the block and across the street, so we left our bikes at the store and walked up to investigate how we might make our way to the rooftop. Most of the downtown buildings were built right beside each other, and the Landers was no exception, except for the fact that it stood on the corner of 5th and Main, and the building next to it had burned down some time ago, allowing the space to be converted to a flower garden and parking area. The building itself was a 3-story rock structure with a plastered storefront. The marquee was triangular, sticking out from either edge of the building to form a small roof for those waiting in line for tickets. Above the marquee was a huge Landers neon sign that ran vertically all the way up to the flat rooftop. The main entrance was double glass doors that had been covered on the inside with old newspaper to prevent anyone from looking in, but over the years some of the corners had come loose to allow a peek at the inside. Still, it was very dark, and the only thing you could make out were the concession stands and some of those brass poles with the fat velvet ropes that corral you into a line. There's actually a picture of this theater in here. I'm going to show you. You can see it. Logan tried the doors, as if after 20 years of being locked, they would somehow be open for us today. Of course they weren't, so we moved around to the back, hoping to find a fire escape. No such luck. We found the only other door to the building, which was a solid metal one with no outside handle at all. The building was locked up tight. More than likely there are stairs just outside this doorway, I said disappointedly. We all stared up to the top of the roof and wondered how we might get up there. The lowest windows in the building were at least 20 feet up, and the only ones that were broken were in the 3rd story. I saw this show one time where these guys were up on top of a building and they crossed over to another building using a long board, Logan said, wide-eyed as ever. This ain't television, Sumner said. But we did walk around to the other side of the theater. Field's office supply was on the other side of a narrow one-way street. It did have a fire escape in the back that went all the way up to the top of the roof. It's still at least 30 feet between these buildings, I said, agreeing with Sumner. Not even an extension ladder would reach across. Maybe we can talk to Mr. Landers and see if he'll let us in, Logan said as we walked back around to Main Street. As far as anyone knows, old man Landers has not opened these doors in 20 years, and you think he's going to do it for us? I questioned. Well, it wouldn't hurt to ask, Logan insisted. You go right ahead and call him up, Sumner said. I dare you. Logan was always big on ideas, but sometimes a little short on bravery. Maybe I will, Logan retorted. And maybe I'll just climb up on the side like Spider-Man, Sumner continued to tease Logan. Okay, guys, we don't have time for this, I said, studying the front of the theater. We've got to think. Surely there's a way up there. An extension ladder would reach up to there, Sumner pointed to the marquee, and then maybe somehow we could climb that sign on top, or at least on one of those broken windows. I was thinking the same thing, but what about that? I pointed up to a block, to the police station, which was in full view of the Landers. There are policemen coming in and out of there all the time. We would surely get caught climbing up the front side of the building on the sign. You've got a point, Sumner agreed. It does look like the easiest way, Logan said. Maybe if we came down late at night, we could manage it without getting caught. I thought you were going to call and get the key from Mr. Landers, I grinned. Logan gave me a sock on the shoulder. Well, however we get up there, it's probably not going to be this morning, and it's probably not going to be during the day, Sumner said. So I say let's move on to the next part of our plan. Maybe today, while we're doing something else, it will come to us as to how to get up there. You're right, I said. I'm ready to see if there's anything at all in any of those other hiding places. Since the library doesn't open until 9 o'clock, let's head to Mrs. Jackson's and see if she can get us into the St. Paul's Church. Secret Squadron to the bicycles, Logan cried as we ran across the street. And that's the end of chapter 10. We grabbed our bicycles and went straight for the Jacksons. Although Mrs. Jackson worked at the paper, she usually didn't leave the house until 9 or later. The paper was an evening edition. We went around to the side door that opened into the kitchen, where they seemed to spend most of their time. Mrs. Jackson answered the door in her nightgown. Well, good morning, boys. My, you're up and around early today. We've got a lot to do today, Logan said. Are you going to tell me what you're up to? Mrs. Jackson asked with her hands on her hips and a wide grin on her face. That's what we're here for, I said, and to ask for your help. Well, come on in here and sit down and tell me what's going on, and I'll see if I can help. Mr. Jackson got up this morning and went fishing, so who knows when he'll be back. We went in and sat down at the kitchen table. Mrs. Jackson was having my all-time favorite breakfast, cinnamon rolls, baked straight from the can. She gave us each a roll dripping with icing and a napkin, and we began telling her the story. We showed her the decoder badge. She vaguely remembered the Captain Midnight radio show. We tried to tell her the abbreviated version, but she would stop us and make sure we told her every last detail. She was every bit as thrilled as we were. This sounds like a story for our paper, she said at last. Maybe, if we really find something, I said, leading up to asking her for help. Well, have you been able to search any of the locations yet? She asked. Not yet, Logan said. We were hoping you could help us with that part. Do you think the belfry they're talking about is in St. Paul's? Mrs. Jackson anticipated our request. Is there any other bell tower downtown? Sumner asked. I don't guess there is. Would you mind taking us up there this morning? I asked. Mind? Are you kidding? You couldn't keep me from it. Are you wanting to go right now? Well, we were hoping, I said. Well, let me get these curlers out of my hair and slip into some other clothes, and we will be on our way. All right, Logan said. A rush of excitement once again came upon us. We could hardly contain ourselves. We were about to find out if what we had spent the last 24 hours working on and dreaming about was real or just some kid's morbid imagination. And with the excitement came, at least for me, the nervous pit in the center of my belly that I could not begin to shake. For some crazy reason, allowing myself to hope was a very big deal. I felt like a basketball player that just shot the ball at the end of the game, at the buzzer, and got fouled. 1 point behind, no time left, and a chance to win the game, or lose it. This sudden potential for both glory and shame. We were about to shoot the ball, and I had a knot in my stomach to prove it. Mrs. Jackson came down the stairs. I'm ready. Do you think we'll need a flashlight? She asked, holding up one in her hand. I think there's a light up there, but I'm not sure it will be enough. We have one too, Sumner informed, but it couldn't hurt if we bring another one. I've got the key. Let's go, Mrs. Jackson said. We decided to walk the 2 blocks to the church. We could see the bell tower from the Jacksons' yard. We made quick time of it and literally ran up the long set of stone steps to the entrance. Unlocking the door, Mrs. Jackson swung it back and ushered us inside. I had always heard how beautiful the sanctuary was, but it was even better than I had imagined. Large stained glass scenes were on either side of the sanctuary. One side displayed scenes from the Old Testament, Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, Moses parting the Red Sea, and Abraham and Isaac on the mountaintop. On the other side were the New Testament, Jesus with his disciples, Jesus on the cross, and finally him resurrected. For a short moment we forgot about the belfry and stood in awe of the beautiful and powerful scenery of the glass. The stairs to the bell tower over here to the left, Mrs. Jackson said, suddenly bringing me back to the task at hand. We followed Mrs. Jackson down the red-carpeted aisle, past the organ, and entered a dark hallway that ended with a large arched doorway. This is it, boys, she whispered secretively. She swung the door back and flipped the switch that was to the left of the door. Dim lights fluttered on to reveal something that looked straight out of a Disney movie. An old stone spiral staircase that looked like no one had climbed it in years. Spider webs were all over the place. Not huge ones like on the movie, but still, they were in every nook and cranny. As you can see, hardly anyone ever comes up here anymore. These bells have been controlled electronically for many years now. In all this time, I don't think I've ever been up here, Mrs. Jackson said, amazed at herself. We began to climb the stone steps. I guess about 3 flights of them in all. We were glad we had brought our flashlights because some of the lights were out and there was only a small window in the whole staircase. We made it to the top where it was still pretty dark. The only light coming in was through a large louvered screen window that were on all 4 sides of the tower. There were 8 bronze bells that hung down from 2 beams, the largest hanging less than a foot from Mrs. Jackson's head. And finally, the roof eave. The top of the wall was 6 or 7 feet up, and the eave actually jutted inward about a foot, making it very deep. Mrs. Jackson could take hold of the edge, but she could not see over it. What was obvious, though, was that we had not thought of something. We were not tall enough, and there was nothing to climb to get up to that eave. "How are we going to get up there?" Logan asked. "We need a ladder," I said. "We should have thought of that in the first place," Sumner said with a bit of disgust. "Now hold on, boys," Mrs. Jackson said. "What do you take me for? You think I can't heave one of you boys up there to the eave?" "Well, do you think you could?" I questioned. "Of course I can. I can surely get Logan up there anyway." Logan was the skinniest and probably didn't weigh 80 pounds. Still, we had our doubts about Mrs. Jackson's abilities, but she had a plan. "Here's what we're going to do. Logan, you stand here facing this eave. I'm going to lace my hands together like a stirrup. I'll have you put your foot in my hands, and I'll try to hoist you up there. You try to use your leg to raise up. And I'll tell you what, boys. You two get behind Logan and give him a boost from the rear. Everybody got it? Are we ready?" Everyone seemed ready. "Okay, on 3. 1, 2, 3. We all said in unison, and up Logan went. Logan grabbed hold of the eave and pulled himself up until his belly caught on the edge. He made it. Mrs. Jackson helped Logan get his legs on over the edge, and Logan was there. "We did it," Sumner said, amazed at our feat. "All right, Mrs. Jackson," Logan hollered. "Here's the flashlight, Logan." I handed it to Mrs. Jackson to pass along. "Tell us what you can see." "Hold on just a minute. Let me get situated." Logan was sitting up on his hands and knees. He began to beam the light from corner to corner. "What do you see?" Sumner demanded. "Will you give me 2 seconds?" Logan said in disgust. "I haven't seen anything yet." "You're seeing something," Logan protested. "Tell us what you're seeing." "What do you want, a play-by-play? All I see are boards that make up the eave and lots of dust." Logan sneezed. "I wish we could get up there," I said, quickly losing patience. "I'll tell you what. I'll run downstairs and see if I can find a stepladder and maybe a new light bulb," Mrs. Jackson said to the relief of Sumner and I. "I'm sure we have something that will get us all up where we can see. Benjamin, come with me and help carry whatever we find." Mrs. Jackson and I went back downstairs and rummaged through the back rooms of the church while Logan continued to search and Sumner continued to nag. We soon found a 3-foot stepladder that we thought would do the trick, so I carried it back up the 3 flights while Mrs. Jackson stopped and unscrewed a light bulb from a table lamp. Back at the top, Sumner and Logan were still at it. "Have you found anything?" I asked, feeling like I had been gone for more than an hour. "Besides a bunch of dirt dauber nests, no," Logan replied disappointedly. "Well, maybe with some more light and more eyes we'll be able to find something," Mrs. Jackson said, replacing the bulb in the wall fixture. "There, that's better. Now where exactly did the message say the classified documents would be hidden?" "All it says was roof eave of belfry," Sumner said. "Well, let's get you two up there," Mrs. Jackson nodded to Sumner and me. "Maybe there's something we're overlooking." Standing on the stepladder, Sumner and I were able to grab hold of the eave and pull ourselves up as Mrs. Jackson pushed from behind. Then Mrs. Jackson stood on top of the ladder where she could see as well. Logan was right. Beside dust and some dirt dauber nests, there didn't seem to be anything else to see. The eave was finished out with planks of wood just like the floor, with the planks running all the way out to the rafters. Benjamin, can I see your flashlight for a second? Mrs. Jackson asked. Sure, I said, handing her the light. You got an idea? Well, I was wondering, out in the very far corner, is there any space between the floor and the roof where you might be able to stick something? The three of us began to feel along the very outer edges of the eave. Even with the flashlight, you could not really see much in such a tight spot, but Mrs. Jackson was right. There was a space, about 2 inches wide, where you could squeeze your hand through. We began going along every inch, feeling along either side of the rafter. Logan kept getting our hopes up, saying he felt something, only to find the remains of a bird nest or a small scrap of wood or a nail. We went over the entire edge twice, but finally we decided it was no use. I really thought we were going to find something, Logan said downheartedly. Even if something had been hidden up here, more than likely someone found it years ago, Sumner said. I guess we were crazy to think something might still be up here, I admitted. Not at all, Mrs. Jackson corrected. If I had found all that in our house, I would have been up here too for myself. Do you think there's any use looking at the other places now? Logan wondered aloud. Of course there is, Mrs. Jackson extorted. Like Sumner said, someone may have found whatever was hidden here. The other places may just be waiting for boys like you to come and find them. I moved onto my hands and knees to crawl back over the ladder when suddenly I felt one of the planks teeter underneath my knee. Wait just a minute, guys, I said, feeling my stomach move up into my throat. I may have found something. In a split second, I had everyone's full attention. Bring one of those flashlights over here so we can see. My voice began shaking like a string on a guitar. Mrs. Jackson moved the ladder over to where I was kneeling, and Logan and Sumner crawled over as quick as they could. Why didn't I think of this before? I said. Think of what? Logan asked. Look! I aimed the flashlight beam onto a short piece of plank flooring. It's just like inside the window seat. Will it come up? Sumner hoped. I felt it rock back and forth when I put my knee on it. I think if we can find something to get it started, it will come right up. Here, try my keys. Mrs. Jackson handed her set of keys to Logan. He chose the longest one and slipped it in the space alongside the loose plank and began to pry. It's moving, but I can't get it to raise up, Logan said, grunting. Try it at the other end, Sumner suggested. Logan moved the key to the other end and pried once more. Pop! Up went the end of a wide board. We all let out a yelp. Sumner lifted the board completely off with both hands as we shined our flashlights down into the hole. I reached my hand down inside the eave, and suddenly I was pulling out a rusty metallic box. We couldn't believe our eyes. We screamed and hollered and came just short of crying. I got so excited I raised up and plowed my head into the rafters above me, but I didn't even care. We found what we were looking for. Mrs. Jackson hugged all three of us at once. All that, and we hadn't even looked to see what was inside. It almost didn't even matter. But finally we settled down enough to take a look at what was inside. The box was actually one of those large tins you get at Christmas time, usually filled with cookies or cheese. It was rusty, but not bad, considering it had been there 50 or 60 years. It obviously had something in it, judging from the weight of it. I just hoped it wasn't cheese. Well, who will do the honors? Mrs. Jackson asked. I think you should, I said, handing the box to her. We couldn't have done this without you. Sumner and Logan both agreed, so finally Mrs. Jackson took the box and pried off the lid. Inside the box we found, not cheese, but 10 Captain Midnight comic books dated 1942-1943. 2 small books, Captain Midnight, The Secret Squadron versus the Terror of the Orient, and Captain Midnight, The Sheikh Jamak. A 1941 code manual, another decoder badge like the one we had in my room. Hey, this is some cool stuff, Sumner explained. Yeah, it's not gold or jewels, but it's still pretty cool, Logan agreed. It may not be gold or jewels, but what you have here may be worth quite a bit of money, Mrs. Jackson declared. You think so? I asked, a little startled by her statement. You bet, she assured us. These comic books seem to be in real good shape, and they're 60 years old. You might be looking at, I don't know, $1,000 right here in this box. Are you serious? Sumner gasped. All right, I gave Logan a high five. We're rich, Logan proclaimed. We all laughed. We may not have been rich in that moment, but we felt like we had struck the mother lode. We might want to put everything back in the box so it doesn't get messed up, Mrs. Jackson suggested. Every wrinkle and crease lowers the values of things like comic books. We quickly followed her suggestion and placed everything neatly back in the tin. Then, with Mrs. Jackson's help, we climbed down from the eave and retraced our steps back to the front of the church. Everything seemed lighter and brighter, the air fresher and cooler. We rushed across the street to tell Dad and Mr. Parks our news and show them our treasures. Even with customers, they stood and listened with their mouths open in a mixture of shock and elation as we recounted our story. Mrs. Jackson said she would definitely put this on front page news with our picture and everything. When we got through with our story, it was going on 9 o'clock. The library was open. We left the box in Dad's care with his promise that he would guard it with his life. Mrs. Jackson was about to go to work when I remembered I had not asked her about the other item of business. Mrs. Jackson, there was one other thing we needed your help with, I said. Well, what's that? Mrs. Jackson asked. It's about the boys that left all this stuff behind. I just can't help but wonder, who was he and what happened to him? That may be a bigger mystery than finding the box. And harder. Dad said you might be able to help us find out his full name and how long he lived in our house. I would be thrilled to help you, Mrs. Jackson said. It's been a long time since I've done any investigative reporting. That's my favorite part of the newspaper business. Our plan is to go and try and find whatever we can at the other hiding places. We had hoped to get it all done today, but I'm not sure now. Maybe we could start our investigation tomorrow anyway. That sounds like a good plan, Mrs. Jackson agreed. I'll be at the paper all morning tomorrow, if you want to come down. And don't forget, I want this story for the paper. I want a full interview with you three, as well as a picture of you and your treasures. I don't guess you could get us into the Landers Theater? Logan asked as he and Sumner joined our conversation. I can't help you there, boys, Mrs. Jackson shrugged. Mr. Landers has had it locked up tight for 20 years. Well, if you think of anything, let us know, I said. You boys be careful today. I want this story to have a happy ending. We will, we said in unison. As Mrs. Jackson walked away, we plunged our fists into the center. 1, 2, 3, Secret Squadron away! Everyone in the store was staring at us, but we didn't care. At that moment, we felt invincible, ready to take on the world. And that's the end of chapter 11. And I don't know about you, but that was a pretty good chapter. See you tomorrow.